We got one more guest, one more segment here for this Thursday edition of Bang the Book Radio. That is with John Ryan at John Ryan Sports and the number one regular contributor to BangTheBook.com. John, how's it going today, man?
I'm doing well, Adam. How about you?
My brain is fried, man. I'll tell you what, I'm going to be very happy to have this MLB guide in the rearview mirror here. But, once again, that labor of love, I guess, things that you enjoy doing are worth taking the time to do. And something you enjoy doing here, a lot of handicapping of basketball. So that's what we're going to talk about in today's segment. And, the focus has by and large been on college basketball for the last week. But now the NBA returns tonight. So we're back to handicapping that market.
Yeah, we are. Your Major League Baseball publication has to be one of the best out there, if not the best. So I just wanted to kind of plug that a little bit for you here, because your work ethic has been amazing, and the value and the contribution you make in terms of information for people to get a hold of you'd be nuts not to get the publication, period.
Well, I really appreciate that. And again, that full PDF will be up on Friday over at bangthebook.com, and hoping to have that on Amazon here for next week. But John, like I said, we're coming off the All-Star break now. So these teams all kind of on equal footing from a situational spot standpoint, all just sort of trying to get back into the rhythms of the season. How do you kind of approach that with the teams coming back off of that long hiatus?
Well, there's a couple trends that are quite interesting. You would think that teams that have been limping into the All-Star break would then come out with a little bit more of a purpose, but it's not the case. In fact, teams that are on a losing streak of 4 games or more going into the All-Star break, they're 5-10 against the spread in the first game coming out of it. So that would put the Bulls, who are playing the Hornets, and these would be all bet against. So you bet against the Bulls when they play the Hornets, and they're all tonight. Pistons when they take on the Bucks, and the Warriors when they take on the Rockets. What's also interesting in these matchups is you have good teams playing bad teams, and 2 of them. Hornets and Bulls are, that's pretty much even on any given day. But the fact that the Pistons are playing the Bucks, who are the best team in the NBA by far, and then the Rockets playing the Warriors, who are basically playing the season out, I find that pretty interesting as well. So I like the Rockets and the Bucks quite a bit tonight to come out of the chute with a purpose, which is opposite of what you would think with a team that lost going into the break.
That is the opposite of what I would think. That's something that we kind of talked about in yesterday's segment with Brian Leonard, where, I kind of like to fade teams that were playing really hot going into the break because everything was going well. You don't want to stop playing, but then you have to. And for teams that go in, to the All-Star break on a losing streak, they do get a chance to wipe the slate clean, do get the opportunity to kind of refine themselves a little bit. Obviously, the difference is, if you've got a team that was playing really bad and is a really bad team, it is hard to expect anything different because they're not really going to want to come back to playing. Whereas if you have a playoff caliber team that was kind of struggling a little bit, maybe that's kind of more of a play on type of scenario.
Yeah, I think you're right on with that. Teams too that were not in the playoffs last year, that are, back-to-back at least losing record seasons, they tend to underperform even more over the next several weeks after the All-Star break. And I think, I guess the mantra, even though they're professionals and they take one day at a time and try to do their best on any given day, when you're coming off a losing season and then you're at the All-Star break and you're 10 games under 500, there's not much motivation there to try to recover and make the playoffs. Whereas if you have a team that was a playoff team for at least the previous year, and they're right at 500 and they have a shot at getting in, those are the teams I think that historically have done well, both straight up and against the spread.
So with that in mind, I mean, is that kind of, your buy and sell portfolio this week, sort of trying to look at, maybe more the motivation levels of teams, or just kind of looking, historically how teams in certain situations have done coming out of the break? Or are there other teams that you kind of have on your buy and sell radar?
There's more teams, Adam, it seems like I'm always on the 76ers bandwagon, but the game against the Clippers that closed out the last game before the All-Star break, that was one of the most impressive performances I've seen a Sixers team put in God knows when. They got Embiid down the paint, and they taught him the difference between the paint and the 3-point line, tongue in cheek, and it worked so incredibly well. And the chemistry of the whole entire team was amazing. And the tone of that game was almost like a game 6 or game 7 in the playoffs. It was amazing to watch just on TV. So I think that's going to carry over. I thought it was hysterical in the All-Star game when they started the second period or the second stanza. Embiid and Simmons jumped for the ball, and Simmons actually out-jumped them. And then down the stretch, too, Simmons was bringing the defense, and I don't think he knows how to play any differently than what he does, whether it's an All-Star game or whether it's a game against the Boston Celtics. He just brings the load every single night. And I don't know if you saw the video clip that kind of went viral with Simmons. It was before the Clippers game, and a fan had recorded Simmons practicing 3-point shooting. He made 8 in a row, and the shot was so soft I can't even begin to tell you. It was like it was almost photoshopped, and you had to doubt in your mind whether it was even him. But it was definitely him. And since the beginning of the year, he's making over 82% of his free throw attempts, which is, how do you compare it to shooting 55%? It's amazing to see his progress, and it seems like they're just working one step at a time, and it's just a matter of games until we'll start seeing him launching threes. And if he starts making threes the way he's able to go to the rim, I think we have the next superstar right there.
So you're still looking at the Sixers as kind of a buy team here. Anybody that you're looking to sell right now coming out of the break?
I think the Raptors actually in the Eastern Conference. I still have a lot of question marks about them. They're 40-15. They've done extraordinarily well. But their point differential, for example, is 6.3, which is healthy. It's one of the better in the league, but it's not 12.1 like the Bucks, which is a historic number. No other team has ever done that. But I do think Toronto came into the break on a 9-1 win streak. Boston Celtics, too, I think I'd be a little cautious on. And again, not to keep talking about the Sixers, but the Sixers lost 6 of the last 7 against the spread coming into the break. So that you're getting an opportunity now where the public was betting the Sixers and they lost. So now they're going to throw them out the window and not bet them, and that's where you really get the opportunity. Conversely, with Boston and Toronto coming in hot, the public's going to be on them, and I think the lines will get a little bit inflated, and that gives you a chance to play the other side. In the Western Conference, there's none that stand out as much as those teams in the East that we just talked about. Memphis is the 8th seed right now, 2 games over 500. A lot of questions there too. They actually have a negative 1.4 scoring differential. They did win their last 2 games coming into the break, and are 8-2 last 10. So that would be more of a team that I would look to sell in the games coming up over the next week.
All right, so let's transition over to the college basketball side of things here. And you do write some week-long outlooks for us over at BangTheBook.com about the Big Ten Conference as well as the Big East Conference. So we got a couple of Big Ten games tonight to discuss. And in fact, you and I were kind of discussing one of these teams a little bit before we started recording here, Ohio State and Iowa. And we talk about buy and sell. And it sounded to me through that discussion we were having that maybe you're looking to buy on the Ohio State Buckeyes a little bit, who are plus 2.5 tonight in Iowa City.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a team that was ranked number 3 back in December, and then went through a really, really bad stretch. Somehow they've managed to claw their way back to a 7-7 conference record. They're ranked 25th and sit in, I believe it's 9th place in the conference, if you can believe that. The Big Ten still remains the best conference by far in the nation. With Maryland at 12-3, they're ranked number 7. Penn State 10-5, and Iowa number 20 at 9-6. So the fact that Ohio State is walking into Iowa, and I believe I saw the line, Adam, at Ohio State was -2.5, I think.
+2.5.
Oh, they're +2.5. The fact that it's within 3 points on either side, I think, is telling you the story right away. Usually in the Big Ten, it's been very difficult to win on the road in the Big Ten. Recently, more road teams have won, but a lot of those road teams are the better teams in the conference with the better record, such as Penn State, who walked into Ohio State and defeated them, and Michigan State. So that's made the road records improve, that the better teams are on the road. But I wouldn't want to have, the guys that are at the top of the standings, I wouldn't want to look in the rearview mirror and see Ohio State getting their act together and climbing up the ladder, because they look like they're about to go on a mission, or maybe they've already started it. So I really, looking at my machine learning tools too, I've already ran that this morning. I wouldn't be surprised if Ohio State won this game by double digits, and that's pretty much what I'm expecting.
Like double digits is definitely a bold call here. I mean, so what is it? I mean, is it kind of what you're seeing statistically? Is it something that you've seen with your eyes watching their games? I mean, what's sort of the what is it that's such a selling point about Ohio State?
They're just the talent on that team. You can have teams that have great talent on paper, but if there's no chemistry, or a couple of the players aren't getting along with each other, or whatever reason it is, they don't perform well. We've seen that time and time again in the NBA when you get a bunch of superstars together and you expect them to win all their games but 10, and something happens and they don't. But I think I do believe completely Ohio State has gotten their act together. And their only loss in the last 5 games has been to Wisconsin, and that was just a clunker, where at that time you almost thought that, they're just reverting back to their normal form of their frustrating season. But then they come back with those 2 impressive wins, and now they're in position to really make a statement. If I was Iowa, even with the talent on that team, I don't think I'd want to be facing Ohio State tonight in the situation that they're in.
Well, speaking of clunkers, a team that's had a lot of them lately here is Michigan State. I mean, this team, we know that they have a very high ceiling. We know that quite possibly they could have the highest upside here in the Big Ten, but they're really not playing like it right now. They're on the road here to take on Nebraska tonight, and they're laying a pretty good number, 12 or 12.5 as we look out there. Sometimes it can be a buy point, a get-right type of game for a team to go on the road and play one of the weakest teams in its conference. But is there any way you could lay a dozen with Michigan State tonight?
I think so. And I'm going to reference basketballreference.com for this. They have some great ratings, and I compare mine always to, just out of curiosity, to see where they're at. And they actually have the same power rankings that I have, where Michigan State is actually the top team in terms of their power rating in the conference. And they're playing Nebraska, who's number 14 and the worst. So I'm not surprised by the line at all. And clearly the play is Michigan State, because they have to win, and they have to win convincingly. And there's no slicing and dicing it any other way. Ohio State, they have ranked number 2, of which that's where I have them as well. And then Maryland, Penn State, Michigan is 5, Rutgers, and then Purdue. And Illinois, who beat Penn State Tuesday night, which was a loss on our article for the Big Ten. I suggested taking Penn State, and Illinois came in there and just, they just played extraordinarily well, and they got the job done. It just reflects how tough this conference is. There's no gimme wins, with the exception of this game that we're talking about tonight with Michigan State and Nebraska. Nebraska is not going to go anywhere, and Michigan State has everything to play for. So if I was going to bet that game, I would definitely have a lean on Michigan State.
All right, so as we look ahead to Saturday here in the Big Ten, there are no Friday games in the Big Ten this week. I know we've had a few of those here recently. Michigan and Purdue was actually the only game on Saturday. We got 4 of them coming up on Sunday, though. What do you sort of think about that one? I mean, there's been a lot of talk here about Purdue and just some enormous home road splits for this team, but they are getting the Wolverines in West Lafayette here for this one on Saturday.
And I think Purdue will get it done. The thing I've learned from Michigan this year is that they defend the perimeter extraordinarily well. Where they're going awry, and I thought head coach Juwan Howard would have changed it by now, is they're so prone to the big man. By defending the perimeter, they automatically stretch their defense out and it leaves the paint open. So if you have a very good a big man that can go head to head with just one defender, it really works against them defensively. So, if they do that lineup again, I think Purdue's just going to keep pounding the paint until, submission. I don't know how else to describe it. It does blow my mind that Michigan has not tried to adjust the defense to be more efficient against those bigger guys.
Well, maybe that's a little bit of the inexperience there of Juwan Howard. Maybe that's something that, we do want to watch here as we go forward, not just for the rest of the regular season, but also once we get to that Big Ten tournament here. But what about Sunday? As we take a look ahead to that one, you've got Penn State, Indiana, Maryland, Ohio State, Rutgers, Wisconsin, Minnesota on the road at Northwestern. Any of those games stand out to you here coming up on February 23rd?
The Penn State-Indiana game, because that's at Indiana, I believe. That is the case, right, Adam?
Yes, sir.
Yep. So that's going to be a good test for Penn State to bounce back from the Illinois loss at home. And Indiana is one of those teams that they're sitting in 11th right now. I would think Penn State's going to be 3.5, maybe even 4 in this game as a favorite. Coach Chambers of Penn State has done a remarkable job for the entire season, but he's extraordinarily good on bounce-back type of games, which this is clearly one of them. So I think Penn State will bounce back with a big showing and a big effort, and they'll come away with the win and ATS win too.
All right, so we transition over to the Big East here, where no games tonight, no games on Friday. So our look ahead here is to Saturday. Marquette and Providence, Villanova and Xavier, Georgetown and DePaul, your 3 games here. And as we look at some projected numbers from Bart Torvik, all of these games basically 1-possession lines here, according to him, for Saturday. Any of those 3 games standing out to you here as we talk a couple days in advance of them?
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the schedule here so I can take a quick look at them here. The one thing I did want to point out before we get to the specific games is that the Big East, in terms of the power ratings, if you evaluate the teams the way I do with the math, you have Creighton as the best. And then you have Seton Hall, Villanova, Butler, and Marquette, all with almost identical power ratings. So the fact of the matter is that Seton Hall barely won last night against Butler. That was actually one of our picks in the Big East article of the week on Bang the Book. And I really thought Butler, before the game started, I had indicated in that article that I thought Butler would take them down. And for 90% of the game, they did. The problem is that you have to play 40 minutes, as we all know, and then Butler allowed them back in, and Seton Hall got an incredibly important win. But in terms of the conference, that's one of the reasons why it's so exciting to watch that conference, not just because they're the 3rd best one in the nation, behind the Big 12 and the Big 10, but every game is exciting, and they have exciting players. Now, let me get to this.
Does that from that standpoint, does it make it more difficult for you to bet just because the gaps between these teams are so small?
Well, I think that's where public sentiment comes into play. In other words, if we have those 4 teams all equal, and all of a sudden we get a line that is saying 5 or 6, then that's telling us something. That's telling us the story of what the public sentiment is. So, as we all know, if it's above 70% of the bets are on one team in a matchup like that, then you probably want to make sure that you're on the other side or just not play it, especially this time of year. It's interesting, too, drawing into March Madness, how the sentiment flips, at least in my opinion. So we know in football, the public loves favorites. And once in a while, they'll bet a dog, but most of the time they're on the home favorite. In college basketball, it kind of starts out like you take the Kentuckys, the North Carolinas, which was a disaster this year. But you understand what I'm saying. If you take the top names, that they're not going to lose to a second-tier conference. When you get into the tournament, all of a sudden it's March Madness, and the public loves the dogs. And it just fascinates me that happens. I have no idea why it happens, but I guess it's because March Madness is, upset after upset after upset. So the public rightfully takes advantage of that information, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I think beginning this time of year, when we get especially a road favorite of one of those 4 teams, playing one of those 4 teams, if I said that right, that would be a sign to bet that road favorite, because it's telling us that there's no reason for that to really be there. It should be more like pick 'em. The fact that it's -3, and thinking of my thought process, if I think it's pick 'em or my math says it's pick 'em and the line's 3, then I always assume the line's right. And if I'm off by 3, that means the favorite is the team that I want to be on if I have a play.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And especially, in a conference like that, and especially, like you said, in the context of getting into conference tournaments, getting into March Madness, things of that sort. So for these 3 games here on Saturday, Marquette, Providence, Villanova, Xavier, Georgetown, DePaul, any of them that, like you said, that we can expand on a little bit more that you do like?
I like Villanova, and we've talked about Villanova in past weeks. This is a time of year that Coach Jay Wright gets his troops organized. I honestly thought last night was actually a premium play for my clients, losing one. The line with DePaul and Villanova looked pretty funny. It was 4.5, 5. And you have to scratch your head and think, well, why in the world is Villanova only favored by that little amount? It seems like an automatic home run on Villanova, like the sports books were giving you away a bonus. But my math was on DePaul, but Villanova crushed them. So with that win being so dominant, I think it's going to carry over to the big game against Xavier, and they'll come away with a win and that's actually a recommended bet on the article. Yeah, I think somehow they'll find a way to win that game, and that one too could be a double-digit win by Villanova. They were very impressive last night. Now, Marquette and Providence, Marquette is another team that has the potential to win the whole thing. And Providence is a team that if you're in the Big East, you don't want to have to go play at Providence, and all you have to do is ask Seton Hall about that just last weekend when Providence knocked them off. They have a tremendous home court advantage, and it shows. And they're also on the fringe of being a contender in the conference as well. So that's going to be a really tough game for Marquette to come away with a win, and I think you have to go with the home team again, meaning again like last week they took off or knocked off Seton Hall, and they're going to do it again this week. So that line I think is going to be closer to pick, which is where Seton Hall was. I could imagine Providence being even favored by a point or two, but my lean for right now is on Providence, and then I'll update on the Twitter feed if it's a premium play too.
Of course, that Twitter feed at John Ryan Sports and the number 1. John, last thing I want to ask you about here for this segment today as we transition over to Sunday in the Big East. You mentioned Creighton, a team that you're high on, a team that some of the other rankings and metric systems you use very high on. Looks like they'll be a pretty decent-sized favorite against Butler on Sunday afternoon. Any thoughts on that game?
Well, it's more the same song that I've been singing here for about the last 10 minutes. Is that Butler is a very good team in their own right, and there's no gimme win here. But I do think Creighton is the play here, for the simple reason of that they're the better team. Not by leaps and bounds, but they are the better team, both sides of the ball. They're playing well, and we're coming down the stretch. And I think Creighton will get it done. And you think they're like 6 or 7 point home favorites, Adam?
I think so. That's probably what the range for this line kind of looks like, especially because, again, Creighton, that jump shooting team, as we've talked about before, their numbers just always annually look better at home than they do on the road. So you give them a little bit more home respect here, I think, too.
Yep, I agree. And then the last game, Seton Hall of St. John's is Seton Hall just has to make sure they don't look ahead, because St. John's has been struggling, but we've also seen St. John's stun some teams this year too. But that's a game where I would have to think Seton Hall will be a double-digit home favorite over St. John's.
A lot of good insights here for the Big East, the Big Ten, and also the NBA. And you can find those same good insights over at BangTheBook.com and the things that John writes for us. But John, your Twitter handle at John Ryan Sports and the number 1. What's going on over there right now, man?
Well, I put up betting systems for free, team trends, put up a halftime trend where people can use that for live in-game betting for certain games. I know it's hard to keep track of everybody's feed that everybody's following, but for the people that do get a hold of the in-game stuff, I really think that's been valuable, in addition to the picks. And for the next 3 days, starting, for those that get to me tonight, I'll start tonight. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we'll do another free session. So you'll get 4 days of all the premium picks for free, just by direct messaging me on Twitter. And we're going to use my dog's name as the password, which is Manny. So just DM me with Manny and write your email address, your name, and you're on board.
There you go. Sounds like a great opportunity for this week. Once again, that's at John Ryan Sports and the number 1 on Twitter. John, appreciate your time as always, man. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll chat with you again next week.
You got it, Adam. Have a good one.